My name is Madeline Quinn. I'm 34 years old, and last Thursday, I raised my right hand and became the youngest federal judge ever appointed in the Southern District of Georgia. It should have been the proudest day of my life, but when I looked out into the gallery of that grand courtroom, lined with colleagues, professors, and even members of the press, the seats reserved for my family were empty, again. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, if I just achieved more, eventually they'd see me. That somehow, one day, my mother would beam with pride, or my sister would speak to me with something other than contempt in her voice. But the truth is, I spent most of my life invisible, especially next to Camilla. Camilla was my older sister by 2 years, and somehow always 10 steps ahead in everyone's eyes. With her sun-kissed curls, pageant smile, and an uncanny ability to charm anyone in under 10 seconds, she was the kind of daughter people noticed. The kind my parents, Diane and Gerald Quinn, built their world around. We grew up in a sleepy part of Savannah, Georgia, in a moss-draped neighborhood filled with porch swings, magnolia trees, and old Southern traditions. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. 2 daughters, a white-painted house with blue shutters, a garden my mother loved showing off. But behind closed doors, perfection had a cost. And I paid it in silence. I was the quiet one, the serious one, the girl who read legal thrillers under the covers at night while Camilla rehearsed for pageants in sequined gowns. At age 9, I was already organizing mock trials with stuffed animals in the backyard. I wanted to know how fairness worked. Maybe because I never saw any of it at home. "Why don't you try dance class like your sister?" my mother would say, smoothing Camilla's curls while barely glancing at me. "It might loosen you up." But I didn't want to be looser. I wanted to be heard. At dinner, every conversation orbited around Camilla, her cheer squad victories, her latest audition, the new photo shoot booked through a friend of a friend. Meanwhile, my straight A's in science, my debate tournament wins, my acceptance into the Junior Legal Scholars Club, all were met with the same distracted smile and half-hearted, "That's nice, Maddie." By the time I was 15, I stopped trying to impress them. I started keeping my achievements to myself, letting them stack silently in folders and files and ribbons tucked in drawers. Because no matter what I did, Camilla would always be the star. And I would always be her quiet shadow. What I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that everything we'd buried in that quiet house on Laurel Ridge would one day erupt, and that the very sister who called me worthless for most of my life would say it again. In court, to my face, in front of a packed room, and the press, and I would smile, steady as ever, because I already knew something she didn't. I had earned the robe, and I was about to let the world see exactly what that meant. College wasn't just a goal, it was my escape plan. When I received a full ride to Duke University, I packed my bags quietly and left Savannah without a single tear. My parents didn't help me move in. Camilla had a photo shoot that weekend in Atlanta, and of course, that took priority. I remember standing in that dorm room alone, staring at the twin bed and the white cinder block walls, thinking, this is mine. Every inch of this life, I will build it myself. While Camilla posted photos from gala fundraisers and beach getaways, I was shelving books at the campus library until midnight and working as a barista at 6 a.m. the next morning. I washed dishes, graded freshman essays as a TA, and applied for every scholarship that came my way. Camilla, meanwhile, had moved to Los Angeles. She'd landed some minor roles in commercials and a fashion campaign that went mildly viral. My parents bragged about her to everyone at church. "She's gonna be on TV," my dad would say with a grin that never appeared when I sent home my report cards. I graduated summa cum laude. No one came to the ceremony. Law school at Vanderbilt was even tougher. The competition was brutal. Everyone had connections. Everyone knew someone. I didn't, but I had grit and a quiet fury burning behind my eyes that no one could see. While Camilla posted photos with influencers and vision board retreats in Bali, I was living off microwaved rice and black coffee, trying to survive both exams and the crushing weight of invisibility. During one of the rare phone calls home, my mother asked, "Do you think Camilla's doing okay?" She said her manager is being mean to her. When I told her I'd just made it onto the law review board, she said, "That's great, sweetie. Anyway, your sister might need a loan. Could you help?" That call ended quickly. After law school, most of my classmates went straight into big-name firms. I didn't. I joined the public defender's office in downtown Atlanta, working cases no one wanted. Addicts, petty thieves, victims of a system rigged against them. Camilla laughed when she found out. "You went to all that school to defend criminals?" She scoffed during a family Christmas video call. "Why not go be like a real lawyer?" But I saw things she couldn't. Lives unraveling at the seams. People hanging by a thread who just needed someone, anyone, to stand beside them. For 3 years, I fought for those people in courtrooms with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. I made $47,000 a year and lived in a studio apartment with a leaking faucet. But I loved it. Because every day, I proved to myself what they never did. I was capable. I mattered. Camilla, on the other hand, was falling deeper into the illusion she'd built. Her Instagram looked perfect, but behind the filters, cracks had already begun to form. And soon, they'd become impossible to ignore. I never expected the call. It came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, just after I'd finished a difficult trial involving a teenage client caught in the middle of a drug trafficking ring. I was soaked from head to toe, eating cold leftovers at my desk when my phone lit up. "Judge Pennington is retiring," the voice on the other end said. "And you've been recommended as her replacement." I blinked. What? "You're on the short list. Your reputation for fairness and cross-experience on both sides of the courtroom makes you a rare candidate." The words barely registered. Me? A judge? The next 3 months passed in a blur. Interviews, background checks, formal endorsements. Every inch of my career and personal life examined under a microscope. I was 34, young, untraditional. But I had something else, an unshakable record. When the confirmation came, I stared at the official letter for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with the old ribbons and certificates my parents never asked to see. The swearing-in ceremony was set in Fulton County Courthouse, in the same courtroom where I had once fought for a single mother wrongfully accused of theft. The gallery filled with law professors, colleagues, even a few former clients who had found their way back from the edge. But the seats I reserved, 3 of them, right in the front, remained empty. I kept glancing at the door until the very last moment. They never came. My father sent a text 5 minutes before it started. "Camilla's back in the hospital. Exhaustion again." We didn't want to leave her alone. I didn't respond. As I raised my right hand and repeated the oath, I didn't feel triumph. I felt alone. After the ceremony, people clapped and cameras flashed. The local news ran a short piece on the rising star appointed to the bench. I shook hands, smiled politely, posed for photos. But when I finally shut the door to my chambers that night, the silence roared louder than any applause. That was the moment something inside me hardened. If they couldn't see me now, they never would. So I stopped looking back. I poured everything into the work. My docket filled quickly: drug cases, domestic violence charges, civil disputes, family court appeals. The pressure was relentless, but I carried it well. And somewhere far away, Camilla was posting filtered photos from Greece with inspirational captions like, "Surround yourself with those who see your light." She had no idea the storm coming for her, and no clue who would be waiting in the eye of it. It started with a whisper. A former classmate of mine, now a financial analyst, sent me a message late one night. "You might want to look into Camilla's husband. Word is he's running some kind of fake investment fund out of Miami." I stared at the screen. Camilla's husband, Trent Beckett, had always struck me as slick. The kind of man who smiled too wide, wore too much cologne, and introduced himself with phrases like, "I make money move." But my parents adored him. A self-made entrepreneur, they'd called him. Visionary. I made a mental note to keep an eye out. In my position, I heard things. Names. Whispers in legal circles. Sometimes the kind you don't forget. Still, I said nothing. until the second whisper came, then the third. Then, a month later, an old friend from the DA's office called with a tone I'd only heard once before, when a local mayor's son was indicted. "You didn't hear this from me, but Trent Beckett is under federal investigation. Securities fraud, wire fraud, maybe even RICO." My stomach sank. I picked up the phone, hesitated, and then set it down again. Camilla hadn't called me in over a year. The last time she did, she left a voicemail complaining about how unfair it was that I didn't send her money for a wellness retreat in Sedona, as if I owed her for my success. I didn't respond then, and I didn't now. But I kept listening. Over the next few months, the facade began to crumble. Camilla stopped posting as often. Her captions lost their sparkle. Then one day, her account disappeared completely. When I called my parents to check in, more out of duty than concern, my mother answered in a whisper, "We're staying with Camilla for now, just until things settle down." "What things?" She paused. "They froze her accounts. Trent says it's a misunderstanding, but we had to help with a few bills. Temporary." My voice went cold. "How temporary?" "Your father took a night job at the hospital garage," she said quickly. "Just for a little while, and I sold a few pieces of jewelry." My jaw clenched. "Your wedding ring?" "It's just a ring," she said too brightly. But I knew that wasn't true. I hung up and sat in the quiet for a long time. I knew what was coming. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, headlines exploded across every news site in the Southeast. Trent Beckett arrested in multi-million-dollar investor fraud scheme socialite wife. Under scrutiny for luxury spending spree, Camilla's mugshot followed the next morning. Not arrested, yet, but listed as a person of interest. The glamorous golden child, the one who once looked down on my courtroom like it was beneath her, was now circling its doors. And fate? Fate had the cruelest sense of humor. Because her case? It was about to land on my desk. It was a Thursday morning when the file landed on my desk. A standard case transfer. Nothing unusual. Judge Robbins had taken medical leave after unexpected surgery, and his docket needed immediate reassignment. As the judge with the lightest load that week, I'd been given 5 new cases. The last name on the list stopped me cold: the state of Georgia versus Camilla Quinn Beckett. I stared at the file, my blood turning to ice. It couldn't be. I flipped through the documents: charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, witness statements, subpoenaed financial records, photos of designer handbags purchased with stolen funds. It was real, and it was my sister. I stood up, heart racing, and walked straight to Chief Judge Reyes's office. She looked up as I entered. "Let me guess, the Beckett case." I nodded. "That's my sister." Her eyebrows lifted. "You're mentioned nowhere in the file. We've been estranged for years," I said. "But the conflict is real. I need to recuse myself." She nodded, but her expression was troubled. "Under normal circumstances, absolutely. But we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Every judge is currently tied up. Trials in session, some with prior conflicts. This hearing," she tapped the folder, "is scheduled for Monday. It's just a preliminary bail review and procedural setting. Routine." "Not for me," I said flatly. "We've reached out to the state ethics board. They agree you can preside, as long as you make the relationship known and give the defense the option to request reassignment." I stared at her. "You want me to sit across from my sister in a courtroom and introduce myself as her judge?" "Only if her team insists on keeping the date," I swallowed. "She doesn't even know I'm a judge." Judge Reyes tilted her head. "Then Monday's going to be interesting." Sunday night, I barely slept. My judicial robe hung pressed and ready. My chambers were cleared. The file sat unopened on the corner of my desk. At 7:45 a.m. Monday, my clerk entered with an unreadable expression. "I spoke to her attorney, and he informed her of your role, per protocol. She didn't take it well." I raised an eyebrow. "She accused him of lying, said it was a strategy to rattle her. She insists the hearing go forward." Of course she did. In her mind, I was still the boring little sister who would never amount to anything. Certainly not someone worthy of the bench she believed belonged to the elite. My heart thudded as I stepped into my private hallway. The courtroom was already filling. Press in the back, her attorney at the table, and there, seated and flipping her hair with affected boredom, was Camilla. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea who was about to walk through that door. But she was about to find out. "All rise." The bailiff's voice echoed across courtroom 6C as I entered from the side door. The room was packed. Reporters, local officials, curious spectators. But I kept my eyes forward, steady, as I approached the bench and took my seat. Only then did I glance toward the defense table. Camilla was seated beside her attorney, a polished man in a navy suit who looked like he'd aged 10 years since taking the case. Camilla, on the other hand, was dressed in a tailored beige blazer, her signature gold earrings on display, hair swept into a sleek bun. She looked every inch the socialite trying to cosplay innocence, until her eyes landed on me. I watched the flicker of confusion cross her face, then disbelief, then horror. I didn't blink. "This court is now in session," I said calmly. "We are here to conduct the preliminary hearing in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Camilla Quinn Beckett." She stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No," she said, voice sharp. "No, this isn't real." Her attorney reached for her arm. "Camilla, sit down." "That's not a judge," she snapped. "That's my sister. My little sister. What kind of sick joke is this?" "Ms. Beckett," I said evenly, "you will address the court respectfully or be held in contempt." She turned on me, eyes wide, voice rising. "You're not a real judge. You were always pathetic, reading books in the dark while I was building a life. This is a setup." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. "Bailiff," I warned softly. He stepped forward. Her attorney looked mortified. "Your Honor, I deeply apologize for my client's behavior. May I request a brief recess?" But Camilla wasn't done. "You think this makes you better than me?" she spat. "You think wearing a robe erases the fact that no one ever loved you? That Mom and Dad never even noticed you unless I was in the room?" I stayed still, calm, but inside, something cracked open and emptied. Camilla looked around the courtroom like she was still commanding a stage. "I will not be judged by her," she yelled. "She's jealous, always has been. You know what people used to call her? Mute Maddie. Because she was so invisible, she might as well not exist." Silence fell. Even the press in the back had stopped typing. Slowly I spoke. "Ms. Beckett, for the record, the court made every effort to avoid this assignment. You were informed of the conflict through your counsel and chose to proceed." "I didn't believe him," she shouted, "because the idea of you being important is laughable." A knock at the side door drew everyone's attention. Chief Judge Reyes entered, her presence commanding as always. She walked directly to the bench. "Good morning, Judge Quinn," she said clearly, nodding at me. Camilla's face drained of color. Reyes turned to the room. "Let the record show that Judge Madeline Quinn is a duly appointed and highly respected member of this bench. Any suggestion otherwise is both inaccurate and inappropriate." Camilla slowly sat down, staring at the wood grain of the defense table like it might save her. I turned to the chief judge. "In light of the defendant's relationship to this court," I said firmly, "I'm formally recusing myself from these proceedings. I request immediate reassignment to preserve judicial integrity." "So ordered," Judge Reyes replied. "Court is adjourned until 3 p.m., where Judge Alston will preside over the matter." The gavel came down. The bailiff called out again, "All rise!" And I stood, straight-backed, unshaken, unapologetically visible. For the first time in my life, in front of the sister who once made me feel like nothing, I took my rightful place, and she couldn't look me in the eye. The video hit 1 million views before sunset. Courtroom footage leaked within hours. Edited clips, headlines spun for drama. Sister showdown in Georgia courtroom. Accused fraudster explodes at her judge sister. There were memes, reaction videos, think pieces. I ignored them all. Instead, I sat in my apartment that evening, lights off, staring out at the Atlanta skyline. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from journalists, old classmates, law school acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years. But only one message stopped me. It was from my father. "We saw what happened today. Are you okay? Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time, then replied with a single word. "Yes." 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Both of them were on speaker. "Hi, Maddie," my mother said quietly. We we had no idea the case would be yours. We didn't even know you were a judge in this district." I swallowed the lump in my throat. It wasn't supposed to be. The original judge had an emergency. It was temporary. Silence. Then my father said something I never expected to hear. "We watched what she said to you. And we're ashamed. No parent should ever hear one child speak to another like that." I closed my eyes. "It's not the first time," I said softly. Another long pause. My mother's voice cracked. "We know." "You do?" "We've known for a long time, Madeline," she whispered. "We just didn't want to admit it. Not to you, not even to ourselves, the way we favored Camilla, the way we made you feel invisible." I didn't say anything. "I think we thought you didn't need us," my father added, his voice thick. "You were always so capable, so quiet. We figured you'd be fine, but that wasn't fair." "No," I said. "It wasn't." "We failed both of you," my mother said through the tears. "We gave her everything, even when she didn't earn it, and we gave you nothing, even when you deserved it most." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more honesty than I'd ever heard from them. When we hung up, I didn't cry. Not yet. That came later, when I received a formal request from Camilla's defense team. She wanted a supervised visit, not as a defendant to a judge, not even as an apology, just as a sister. I wasn't sure I could handle it, but something in me said I had to go. Not for her, for me. The detention center was cold and sterile. Metal chairs, buzzing lights, no warmth anywhere except in the guarded eyes of the people sitting across from one another. Camilla looked smaller than I remembered. Gone were the designer clothes, the flawless makeup, the calculated poise. She wore a beige jumpsuit, her hair pulled back loosely. Her face was pale, but her eyes, those electric blue eyes, looked clearer than they had in years. We sat across from each other in silence. Then she spoke. "I didn't believe it at first," she said, voice hoarse. "When Martin told me my sister was the judge, I thought it was a trick, some courtroom stunt." I nodded once, letting her talk. "I thought, you couldn't be. You were always so quiet, always in the background," she laughed softly, bitter and broken. "Turns out, the background was where all the strength was." I didn't speak. "I humiliated myself in that courtroom," she said. "But worse, I humiliated you. Again." I met her gaze. "You did. I can't undo it. Any of it. Not what I said, not what I did to Mom and Dad, not the way I made you feel like you didn't matter." She took a breath. "But I see it now. I see you now." Silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of 30 years. Then I said, "I don't hate you." Camilla blinked. "Why not?" "Because I finally realized your validation isn't what makes me whole. It never was. I spent years trying to earn a spotlight I didn't need. All that time I was building something you couldn't see." She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we ever be sisters again?" I hesitated. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That depends on what you do when no one's watching." She nodded slowly. "Fair enough. In the months that followed, I kept my distance. But I watched." Camilla entered rehab, accepted a plea deal, spoke at restitution hearings, and faced every consequence head-on. She began working at a nonprofit, helping formerly incarcerated women find housing and work. I didn't visit often, but when I did, I saw a different version of her. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. As for me, I moved forward. My mentoring program expanded. I got engaged to someone who loved me, not for what I'd achieved, but for who I had become. One night, I stood in front of the mirror before a speaking event, adjusting my robe. And I smiled. Not because I had proven anyone wrong, but because I no longer needed to.